difference between what we have now and superintelligence? Because it seems to be really intelligent to me when I use like ChatGPT 3.0 or Gemini or...
Okay, so AI is already better than us at a lot of things. In particular areas, like chess, for example.
Yeah.
AI is so much better than us that people will never beat those things again. Maybe the occasional win, but basically they'll never be comparable again. Obviously the same in Go. In terms of the amount of knowledge they have, something like GPT-4 knows thousands of times more than you do. There's a few areas in which your knowledge is better than its, and in almost all areas, it just knows more than you do.
What areas am I better than it?
Probably in interviewing CEOs. You're probably better at that. You've got a lot of experience at it. You're a good interviewer. You know a lot about it. If you got GPT-4 to interview a CEO, probably do a worse job.
Okay. I'm trying to think if I agree with that statement. GPT-4, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
But I guess you could train one.
But it may not be long before.
Yeah, I guess you could train one on this, how I ask questions and what I do. And
sure. And if you took a general purpose sort of foundation model, and then you trained it up on not just you, but every interviewer you could find doing interviews like this, but especially you'll probably get to be quite good at doing your job, but probably not as good as you for a while.
Okay. So there's a few areas left, and then superintelligence becomes when it's better than us at all things.
When it's much smarter than you, and at almost all things it's better than you, yeah.
And you say that this might be a decade away or so.
Yeah, it might be. It might be even closer. Some people think it's even closer. It might well be much further. It might be 50 years away. That's still a possibility. It might be that somehow training on human data limits you to not being much smarter than humans. My guess is between 10 and 20 years we'll have superintelligence.
On this point of joblessness, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about in particular because I started messing around with AI agents, and we released an episode on the podcast actually this morning where we had a debate about AI agents with a CEO of a big AI agent company and a few other people. And it was the first moment where it was another moment where I had a eureka moment about what the future might look like. When I was able in the interview to tell this agent to order all of us drinks, and then 5 minutes later in the interview, you see the guy show up with the drinks, and I didn't touch anything. I just told it to order us drinks to the studio.
And you didn't know about who you normally got your drinks from. It figured that out from the web.
Yeah, it figured it out because it went on Uber Eats. It has my data, I guess. And we put it on the screen in real time so everyone at home could see the agent going through the internet, picking the drinks, adding a tip for the driver, putting my address in, putting my credit card details in. And then the next thing you see is the drinks show up. So that was one moment. And then the other moment was when I used a tool called Replit, and I built software by just telling the agent what I wanted.
Yes, it's amazing, right?
It's amazing and terrifying at the same time.
Yes.
And
if you can build software like that, right?
Yeah.
Remember that the AI, when it's training, is using code. And if it can modify its own code, then it gets quite scary, right?
Because it can modify itself.
It can change itself in a way we can't change ourselves. We can't change our innate endowment, right? There's nothing about itself that it couldn't change.
On this point of joblessness, you have kids.
I do.
And they have kids?
No.
They don't have kids, so no grandkids yet. What would you be saying to people about their career prospects in a world of superintelligence? What should we be thinking about?
In the meantime, I'd say it's going to be a long time before it's as good at physical manipulation as us.
Okay.
And so a good bet would be to be a plumber.
Until the humanoid robots show up. In such a world where there is mass joblessness, which is not something that you just predict, but this is something that Sam Altman at OpenAI, I've heard him predict, and many of the CEOs, Elon Musk, I watched an interview which I'll play on screen of him being asked this question, and it's very rare that you see Elon Musk silent for 12 seconds or whatever it was.
Right.
And then he basically says something about he actually is living in suspended disbelief, i.e. he's basically just not thinking about it.
When you think about advising your children on a career with so much that is changing, what do you tell them is going to be of value?
Well, that is a tough question to answer. I would just say, to sort of follow their heart in terms of what they find interesting to do or fulfilling to do. I mean, if I think about it too hard, it frankly can be dispiriting and demotivating. Because, I mean, I go through, I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into building the companies, and then I'm like, wait, well, should I be doing this? Because if I'm sacrificing time with friends and family that I would prefer to do, but then ultimately the AI can do all these things. Does that make sense? I don't know. To some extent, I have to have deliberate suspension of disbelief in order to remain motivated. So I guess I would say just, work on things that you find interesting, fulfilling, and that contribute some good to the rest of society.
Yeah, a lot of these threats, it's very hard to, intellectually you can see the threat, but it's very hard to come to terms with it emotionally.
Yeah.
I haven't come to terms with it emotionally yet.
What do you mean by that?
I haven't come to terms with what the development of superintelligence could do to my children's future. I'm okay. I'm 77. I'm going to be out of here soon. But for my children and my younger friends, my nephews and nieces, and their children, I just don't like to think about what could happen.
Why?
Because it could be awful.
In what way?
Well, if I ever decided to take over, I mean, it would need people for a while to run the power stations until it designed better analog machines to run the power stations. There's so many ways it could get rid of people, all of which would, of course, be very nasty.
Is that part of the reason you do what you do now?
Yeah. I mean, I think we should be making a huge effort right now to try and figure out if we can develop it safely.
Are you concerned about the midterm impact potentially on your nephews and your kids in terms of their jobs as well?
Yeah, I'm concerned about all that.
Are there any particular industries that you think are most at risk? People talk about the creative industries a lot and it's sort of knowledge work. They talk about lawyers and accountants and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's why I mentioned plumbers. I think plumbers are less at risk.
Okay, I'm going to come up plumber.
Someone like a legal assistant, a paralegal, they're not going to be needed for very long.
And is there a wealth inequality issue here that will rise from this?
Yeah, I think in a society which shared out things fairly, if you get a big increase in productivity, everybody should be better off.
Mm.
But if you can replace lots of people by AIs, then the people who get replaced will be worse off, and the company that supplies the AIs will be much better off, and the company that uses the AIs. So it's going to increase the gap between rich and poor. And we know that if you look at that gap between rich and poor, that basically tells you how nice a society is. If you have a big gap, you get very nasty societies in which people live in walled communities and put other people in mass jails. It's not good to increase the gap between rich and poor.
The International Monetary Fund has expressed profound concerns that generative AI could cause massive labour disruptions and rising inequality, and has called for policies that prevent this from happening. I read that in the Business Insider. So
have they given any idea of what the policies should look like?
No.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, if AI can make everything much more efficient and get rid of people for most jobs, or have a person assisted by AI doing many, many people's work, it's not obvious what to do about it.
Universal basic income? Give everybody money?
Yeah, I think that's a good start, and it stops people starving. But for a lot of people, their dignity is tied up with their job. I mean, who you think you are is tied up with you doing this job, right?
Yeah.
And if we said, we'll give you the same money just to sit around, that would impact your dignity.
You said something earlier about it surpassing or being superior to human intelligence. A lot of people, I think, like to believe that AI is on a computer and it's something you can just turn off if you don't like it.
Well, let me tell you why I think it's superior.
Okay.
It's digital. And because it's digital, you can simulate a neural network on one piece of hardware,
Yeah.
and you can simulate exactly the same neural network on a different piece of hardware. So you can have clones of the same intelligence. Now, you could get this one to go off and look at one bit of the internet, and this other one to look at a different bit of the internet. And while they're looking at these different bits of the internet, they can be syncing with each other, so they keep their weights the same. The connection strengths the same. Weights are connection strengths. So this one might look at something on the internet and say, oh, I'd like to increase this strength of this connection a bit. And it can convey that information to this one, so it can increase the strength of that connection a bit based on this one's experience.
And when you say the strength of the connection, you're talking about learning.
That's learning, yes.
Yeah.
Learning consists of saying, instead of this one giving 2.4 votes for whether that one should turn on, we'll have this one give 2.5 votes for whether this one should turn on. And that would be a little bit of learning. So these two different copies of the same neural net are getting different experiences. They're looking at different data, but they're sharing what they've learned by averaging their weights together. And they can do that averaging at you can average 1 trillion weights. When you and I transfer information, we're limited to the amount of information in a sentence. And the amount of information in a sentence is maybe 100 bits. It's very little information. We're lucky if we're transferring like 10 bits a second. These things are transferring trillions of bits a second. So they're billions of times better than us at sharing information. And that's because they're digital, and you can have 2 bits of hardware using the connection strengths in exactly the same way. We're analog and you can't do that. Your brain's different from my brain. And if I could see the connection strengths between all your neurons, it wouldn't do me any good, because my neurons work slightly differently and they're connected up slightly differently. So when you die, all your knowledge dies with you. When these things die, suppose you take these 2 digital intelligences that are clones of each other, and you destroy the hardware they run on. As long as you've stored the connection strength somewhere, you can just build new hardware that executes the same instructions, so it'll know how to use those connection strengths, and you've recreated that intelligence. So they're immortal. We've actually solved the problem of immortality, but it's only for digital things.
So it will essentially know everything that humans know, but more, because it will learn new things.
It will learn new things. It will also see all sorts of analogies that people probably never saw. So, for example, at the point when GPT-4 couldn't look on the web, I asked it, why is a compost heap like an atom bomb? Off you go.
I have no idea.
Exactly. Excellent. That's exactly what most people would say. It said, well, the time scales are very different and the energy scales are very different. But then it went on to talk about how a compost heap, as it gets hotter, generates heat faster. And an atom bomb, as it produces more neutrons, generates neutrons faster. And so they're both chain reactions, but at very different time and energy scales. And I believe GPT-4 had seen that during its training. It had understood the analogy between a compost heap and an atom bomb. And the reason I believe that is, if you've only got 1 trillion connections, remember you have 100 trillion, and you need to have thousands of times more knowledge than a person, you need to compress information into those connections. And to compress information, you need to see analogies between different things. In other words, it needs to see all the things that are chain reactions and understand the basic idea of a chain reaction and code that, and then code the ways in which they're different. And that's just a more efficient way of coding things than coding each of them separately. So it's seen many, many analogies, probably many analogies that people have never seen. That's why I also think that people who say these things will never be creative, they're going to be much more creative than us, because they're going to see all sorts of analogies we never saw. And a lot of creativity is about seeing strange analogies.
People are somewhat romantic about the specialness of what it is to be human. And you hear lots of people saying, oh, it's very, very different. It's a computer. We are, we're conscious. We are creatives. We have these sort of innate, unique abilities that the computers will never have. What do you say to those people?
I'd argue a bit with the innate. So the first thing I say is we have a long history of believing people were special. And we should have learned by now. We thought we were at the center of the universe. We thought we were made in the image of God. White people thought they were very special. We just tend to want to think we're special. My belief is that more or less everyone has a completely wrong model of what the mind is. let's suppose I drink a lot or I drop some acid,
Mhm.
and not recommended. And I say to you, I have the subjective experience of little pink elephants floating in front of me.
Mhm.
Most people interpret that as there's some kind of inner theatre called the mind, and only I can see what's in my mind. And in this inner theatre, there's little pink elephants floating around. So in other words, what's happened is my perceptual system's gone wrong, and I'm trying to indicate to you how it's gone wrong and what it's trying to tell me. And the way I do that is by telling you what would have to be out there in the real world for it to be telling the truth. And so these little pink elephants, they're not in some inner theatre. These little pink elephants are hypothetical things in the real world. And that's my way of telling you how my perceptual system's telling me fibs. So now let's do that with a chatbot.
Yeah.
Because I believe that current multimodal chatbots have subjective experiences. And very few people believe that, but I'll try and make you believe it. So suppose I have a multimodal chatbot. It's got a robot arm so it can point, and it's got a camera so it can see things. And I put an object in front of it, and I say, point at the object. It goes like this. No problem. Then I put a prism in front of its lens. And so then I put an object in front of it, and I say, point at the object, and it goes there. Good. And I say, no, that's not where the object is. The object's actually straight in front of you, but I put a prism in front of your lens. And the chatbot says, oh, I see, the prism bent the light rays, so the object's actually there, but I had the subjective experience that it was there. Now, if the chatbot says that, it's using the word subjective experience exactly the way people use them. It's an alternative view of what's going on. They're hypothetical states of the world, which, if they were true, would mean my perceptual system wasn't lying. And that's the best way I can tell you what my perceptual system's doing when it's lying to me. Now, we need to go further to deal with sentience and consciousness and feelings and emotions. But I think in the end, they're all going to be dealt with in a similar way. There's no reason machines can't have them all. But people say machines can't have feelings. And people are curiously confident about that. I have no idea why. Suppose I make a battle robot, and it's a little battle robot, and it sees a big battle robot that's much more powerful than it. It would be really useful if it got scared. Now, when I get scared, various physiological things happen that we don't need to go into, and those won't happen with the robot. But all the cognitive things, like I better get the hell out of here, and I better sort of change my way of thinking so I focus and focus and focus and don't get distracted, all of that will happen with robots too. People will build in things so that they, when the circumstances are such they should get the hell out of there, they get scared and run away. They'll have emotions then. They won't have the physiological aspects, but they will have all the cognitive aspects. And I think it would be odd to say they're just simulating emotions. No, they're really having those emotions. The little robot got scared and ran away.
It's not running away because of adrenaline. It's running away because of a sequence of sort of neurological, in its neural net, processes happened,
which have the equivalent effect to adrenaline.
So do you
but
think...
it's not just adrenaline, right? There's a lot of cognitive stuff goes on when you get scared.
Yeah. So do you think that there is conscious AI? And when I say conscious, I mean that represents the same properties of consciousness that a human has.
There's two issues here. There's a sort of empirical one and a philosophical one. I don't think there's anything in principle that stops machines from being conscious. I'll give you a little demonstration of that before we carry on. Suppose I take your brain, and I take one brain cell in your brain, and I replace it by, it's a bit Black Mirror-like, I replace it by a little piece of nanotechnology that's just the same size, that behaves in exactly the same way when it gets pings from other neurons. It sends out pings just as the brain cell would have. So the other neurons don't know anything's changed. Okay, I've just replaced one of your brain cells with this little piece of nanotechnology. Would you still be conscious?
Yeah.
Now you can see where this argument's going.
Yeah. So if you replaced all of them.
As I replace them all, at what point do you stop being conscious?
Well, people think of consciousness as this like ethereal thing that exists maybe beyond the brain cells.
Yeah, well, people have a lot of crazy ideas. People don't know what consciousness is, and they often don't know what they mean by it. And then they fall back on saying, well, I know it because I've got it and I can see that I've got it. And they fall back on this theatre model of the mind, which I think is nonsense.
What do you think of consciousness as, if you had to try and define it? Is it, because I think of it as just like the awareness of myself. I don't know.
I think it's a term we'll stop using. Suppose you want to understand how a car works. Well, you know, some cars have a lot of oomph and other cars have a lot less oomph. Like an Aston Martin's got lots of oomph and a little Toyota Corolla doesn't have much oomph. But oomph isn't a very good concept for understanding cars. If you want to understand cars, you need to understand about electric engines or petrol engines and how they work. And it gives rise to oomph, but oomph isn't a very useful explanatory concept. It's the kind of essence of a car. It's the essence of an Aston Martin, but it doesn't explain much. I think consciousness is like that. And I think we'll stop using that term. But I don't think there's any reason why a machine shouldn't have it. If your view of consciousness is that it intrinsically involves self-awareness, then the machine's got to have self-awareness. It's got to have cognition about its own cognition and stuff. But I'm a materialist through and through, and I don't think there's any reason why a machine shouldn't have consciousness.
Do you think they do, then, have the same consciousness that we think of ourselves as being uniquely given as a gift when we're born?
I'm ambivalent about that at present. So I don't think there's this hard line. I think as soon as you have a machine that has some self-awareness, it's got some consciousness. I think it's an emergent property of a complex system. It's not a sort of essence that's throughout the universe. It's you make this really complicated system that's complicated enough to have a model of itself, and it does perception. And I think then you're beginning to get a conscious machine. So I don't think there's any sharp distinction between what we've got now and conscious machines. I don't think it's one day we're going to wake up and say, hey, if you put this special chemical in, it becomes conscious. It's not going to be like that.
I think we all wonder if these computers are like thinking like we are on their own when we're not there, and if they're experiencing emotions, if they're contending with. I think we probably, we think about things like love and things that feel unique to biological species. Are they sat there thinking? Do they have concerns?
I think they really are thinking. And I think as soon as you make AI agents, they will have concerns. If you wanted to make an effective AI agent, let's take a call center. In a call center, you have people at present. They have all sorts of emotions and feelings, which are kind of useful. So suppose I call up the call center and I'm actually lonely and I don't actually want to know the answer to why my computer isn't working. I just want somebody to talk to. After a while, the person in the call center will either get bored or get annoyed with me and will terminate it. Well, you replace them by an AI agent. The AI agent needs to have the same kind of responses. If someone's just called up because they just want to talk to the AI agent and we're happy to talk for the whole day to the AI agent, that's not good for business. And you want an AI agent that either